The Galactic Council meeting hall buzzed with nervous energy as Ambassador Crix-9 adjusted his breathing apparatus for the third time in 10 minutes. His purple skin had taken on an alarming shade of violet, which everyone knew meant he was either terrified or about to molt. Given the circumstances, the smart money was on terrified. "She cannot be serious about this proposal," wheezed Counselor Nethys Prime, her 6 eyes blinking in rapid succession. The way she said it made it sound like someone had suggested using a black hole as a vacation destination. Surely even humans are not that reckless. Crix-9 would have laughed if his species was capable of producing anything resembling mirth. Instead, he made a sound like air escaping from a punctured balloon. "You obviously haven't studied human behavioral patterns as extensively as I have. Reckless doesn't even begin to cover it. They're the species that thought it was a good idea to domesticate wolves and then let them sleep in their beds." The subject of their growing panic sat calmly in the center of the circular chamber, apparently unbothered by the fact that 12 different alien species were staring at her like she'd just announced her intention to juggle supernovas. Captain Maya Torres of the United Earth Colonial Service wore her standard-issue uniform with the kind of confidence that made lesser beings wonder if she secretly knew something they didn't. Spoiler alert, she definitely did. "Captain Torres," began Supreme Counselor Zeph Alpha, his voice carrying the weight of someone who had to deal with impossible situations on a daily basis. "Are you absolutely certain you understand what you're proposing?" Maya's smile was the kind that made insurance adjusters break out in cold sweats. "Oh, I understand perfectly. You've got a problem with Kepler 442b, the planet the locals call Nethys Prime. Your mining consortium can't establish a foothold because, and I quote from your own reports, the planet appears to be actively hostile to all known forms of intelligent life." "Hostile is putting it mildly," muttered Trade Representative Quinn 7 under his breath. His species had evolved from something resembling a cross between a praying mantis and a very anxious accountant. "The last survey team that landed there lasted exactly 4 hours and 17 minutes. The planet ate them." "Ate them?" Maya raised an eyebrow with the precision of someone who had practiced that exact expression in front of a mirror. "Like, literally ate them? Or are we talking metaphorically ate them?" The uncomfortable silence that followed was the kind you could have cut with a knife and served at dinner parties. "Both," Crix-9 finally admitted, his voice barely above a whisper. "The preliminary reports suggest that Nethys Prime has somehow developed what can only be described as a planetary immune system. Everything on that world, from the smallest microorganism to the largest predator, works together to eliminate foreign threats." Maya leaned back in her chair with the casual grace of someone who had just been told the weather forecast. "Sounds like Tuesday on Earth." Every alien in the room made some variation of a choking sound. "Captain," Zeph Alpha tried again, clearly hoping she was joking. "Perhaps you don't fully grasp the severity of the situation. This isn't simply a dangerous world. This is a planet that appears to have achieved a level of biological coordination that defies our understanding of evolutionary science. The atmospheric conditions alone would kill most known species within minutes." "Most known species?" Maya repeated, her tone suggesting she found this fact more amusing than concerning. "But not humans." "Well, no, not necessarily humans," admitted Medical Officer Thais 2, consulting her datapad with the enthusiasm of someone reading their own death certificate. "Your species does seem to have an unusual tolerance for environmental extremes. But, Captain, the gravity on Nethys Prime is 1.8 times Earth standard. The oxygen content is 37% higher than your home world. The electromagnetic interference from the planet's core would render most technology useless within hours. Maya's grin widened. So you're telling me it's a high-gravity world with an oxygen-rich atmosphere and natural EMP protection? Are you trying to make this sound more appealing? The silence was so profound, you could hear the sound of 12 different species simultaneously questioning their life choices. Counselor Nethys Prime cleared her throat, producing a sound like gravel being mixed in a cement mixer. Captain Torres, perhaps you could explain to us exactly how you propose to succeed, where our most advanced survey teams have failed? Simple, Maya said, standing up and stretching in a way that made several aliens flinch reflexively. You send me down there alone. The collective gasp that followed could have powered a small starship. Alone? Crix 9's voice cracked like a teenager asking someone to prom. Captain, with all due respect to your species' apparent death wish, that's not a plan. That's suicide with paperwork. Maya pulled out a small device that looked suspiciously like something you'd find in a human camping store and set it on the table. This is a standard Earth survival kit. Contains enough supplies for 2 weeks, water purification tablets, basic medical equipment, and a few other odds and ends. That's it? Trade Representative Quinn 7 leaned forward, his compound eyes reflecting the light in a way that made him look deeply concerned. That's your entire preparation for conquering a death world? Conquering is such an ugly word, Maya said, with a shrug that suggested she found the entire conversation mildly entertaining. I prefer aggressive negotiation. Supreme Counselor Zeph Alpha made a sound that might have been laughter if it hadn't been so obviously tinged with hysteria. Captain, I'm beginning to understand why your species has such a reputation in certain circles. Oh, you mean the circles where people think we're completely insane? Those would be the ones, yes. Maya picked up her survival kit and headed toward the door with the kind of purposeful stride that suggested she had places to be and planets to negotiate with. Gentlemen, ladies, and assorted non-binary entities, I'll be back in 2 weeks. Try not to panic too much while I'm gone. And if you don't come back, called Thys 2. Maya paused at the doorway and looked back over her shoulder with a smile that would have made sharks nervous. Then you'll know the planet won this round. But between you and me, I don't lose very often. The door slid shut behind her with a soft hiss, leaving 12 of the galaxy's most intelligent species staring at empty air and wondering if they had just witnessed the beginning of something extraordinary or the end of human involvement in galactic affairs. Probably both. 3 hours later, Maya was strapped into the pilot's seat of a modified atmospheric entry pod that looked like it had been designed by someone who understood the basic principles of aerodynamics, but had decided to ignore them out of spite. The pod was roughly the size of a small closet and had about as much protection as a particularly optimistic umbrella. Final systems check complete, announced the pod's AI in a voice that managed to sound both reassuring and deeply concerned. All systems are green, though I feel obligated to mention that my programming includes 17 different ways to say goodbye, and I'm pretty sure I'm going to need all of them. Thanks for the vote of confidence, Aria, Maya said, running through her pre-flight checklist with the practiced efficiency of someone who had made a career out of landing in places where other people refused to visit. How's our approach vector looking? Like a mathematical representation of your chances of survival, Aria replied cheerfully. The good news is that the planet's gravitational field is stable. The bad news is that everything else about this approach violates approximately 47 different safety protocols. Maya laughed, and the sound echoed strangely in the cramped confines of the pod. Aria, if I followed safety protocols, I'd still be sitting behind a desk on Luna Station filing reports about other people's adventures. Point taken. Initiating atmospheric entry in 3, 2, 1. The pod hit Nethys Prime's atmosphere like a meteor with abandonment issues. The walls around Maya began to glow cherry red as the heat shields struggled to cope with the planet's surprisingly dense atmospheric envelope. Through the small porthole, she could see the surface of the planet rushing up to meet her with what appeared to be personal animosity. Hull temperature approaching critical levels, Aria announced, with the kind of calm that suggested she had accepted her fate. On the bright side, if we burn up during entry, you won't have to deal with whatever's waiting for us on the surface. Always looking on the bright side, Maya muttered, adjusting her harness as the pod began to shake like a paint mixer having an existential crisis. How long until touchdown? Assuming we survive the next 30 seconds? 4 minutes and change. Through the growing haze of superheated atmosphere, Maya caught her first real glimpse of Nethys Prime's surface. The planet was beautiful in the way that natural disasters were beautiful, all sweeping vistas and dramatic geological features that looked like they had been designed by someone with a serious grudge against the concept of flat, boring terrain. Towering mountain ranges stretched across continents like the spine of some impossibly large creature. Vast forests covered the lowlands in shades of green that had apparently never heard of subtlety. Rivers wound through the landscape like silver threads, connecting massive lakes that reflected the light of the system's binary stars. It looked, Maya had to admit, exactly like the kind of place that would try to kill you just to keep things interesting. Aria, I'm seeing some unusual formations down there. Are you getting any readings on the local geology? Define unusual, Aria replied, though her sensors were already working overtime to process the incoming data. Because if you mean geological formations that appear to be actively rearranging themselves, then yes, I'm getting some very interesting readings, indeed. Maya pressed her face to the porthole and watched in fascination as what she had initially taken for a mountain range seemed to shift and flow like liquid stone. That's not supposed to be possible. I've got a growing list of things that aren't supposed to be possible, and we haven't even landed yet, Aria observed. Would you like me to add it to the file? Start a new file. Call it Tuesday on Nethys Prime. The pod's parachute deployed with a sound like canvas being enthusiastically abused, and Maya felt her stomach relocate somewhere in the vicinity of her throat as their descent suddenly became significantly less suicidal. Through the porthole she could see they were heading for what looked like a clearing in one of the massive forests, a clearing that was moving. Aria, please tell me that landing zone isn't what I think it is. There was a pause that lasted just long enough to be ominous. Well, the good news is that it's definitely a clearing. The potentially problematic news is that it appears to be a clearing that's actively clearing itself for our arrival. Maya watched in growing amazement as trees along the edge of the clearing began to uproot themselves and walk away. Not fall over. Not get pushed aside by some unseen force. Walk away, using their root systems like legs, and moving with the purposeful gait of someone who had just remembered they had somewhere else to be okay, Maya said slowly. That's definitely not in any of the survey reports. Perhaps the previous survey teams were too busy being eaten to take proper notes? The pod touched down with a thud that rattled Maya's teeth and made several alarming sounds that suggested important things might have broken. For a moment, everything was quiet except for the steady hum of the pod's life support systems and the distant sound of what might have been wind in the trees. Or might have been something else entirely. Maya unstrapped herself from the pilot's seat and began the process of suiting up for her first venture onto the surface of Nethys Prime. The atmospheric readings showed that the air was breathable, if a bit on the oxygen-rich side, but standard protocol called for environmental suits during initial planetfall. Standard protocol, however, had apparently not taken into account the possibility that the planet itself might be watching. Aria, are you picking up any movement outside the pod? Define movement. If you mean the usual kinds of movement associated with local wildlife, then no. If you mean movement that suggests the entire forest is repositioning itself to get a better view of our landing site, then yes, quite a lot of that. Maya sealed her helmet and checked her weapon systems one more time. The plasma rifle felt reassuringly solid in her hands, even though she suspected that if the planet really wanted her dead, a hand weapon wasn't going to make much difference. Time to meet the neighbors, she said, reaching for the pod's exit controls. Captain, Aria said, and for the first time since they'd begun this insane mission, the AI actually sounded worried. Are you absolutely certain about this? Because once you step outside that pod, we're officially in uncharted territory. Maya's hand paused on the door release. Through the porthole, she could see shapes moving in the forest around the clearing. Large shapes. Shapes that seemed to be keeping a respectful distance, while still maintaining what could only be described as intense curiosity. Aria, in your professional opinion as an advanced artificial intelligence with access to the sum total of human knowledge, what are the odds that I'm about to do something spectacularly stupid? Approximately 97.3%. Maya grinned and hit the door release. I like those odds. The pod's door hissed open, and Captain Maya Torres of the United Earth Colonial Service stepped onto the surface of Nethys Prime, a planet that had supposedly killed every intelligent being that had ever tried to land on it. The first thing she noticed was that the air smelled like cinnamon and ozone. The second thing she noticed was that the forest had gone completely silent. The third thing she noticed was that something very large was watching her from the tree line. And it was definitely not a tree. The something watching Maya from the tree line turned out to be approximately 15 feet tall, covered in what looked like living bark, and sporting more eyes than any reasonable creature had a right to possess. It also appeared to be trying very hard not to move, as if it was playing the galaxy's most high-stakes game of freeze tag. Maya lowered her plasma rifle and took a step forward. Well, hello there, gorgeous. The creature made a sound like wind chimes having an argument with a piccolo. Every tree in the immediate vicinity rustled, despite the complete absence of any actual wind. Aria, are you getting this? Oh yes, the AI replied through her helmet comm. I'm getting readings that suggest this entire forest is essentially one massive interconnected organism. Think of it as a really big, really complicated nervous system that happens to have trees for brain cells. Maya nodded thoughtfully, as if this was the kind of information she received on a regular Tuesday. So, basically, I'm standing in the middle of a giant biological computer that thinks I'm a virus. That's actually a surprisingly accurate analogy. The bark-covered creature took a cautious step forward, and Maya noticed that its feet didn't quite touch the ground. Instead, root-like tendrils extended from its lower extremities and plugged directly into the forest floor. When it moved, information seemed to flow through the connection, like data through fiber optic cables. Fascinating, Maya murmured, holstering her weapon completely. It's not just connected to the forest. It is the forest. The creature's multiple eyes focused on her with laser-like intensity. When it spoke, the voice came from everywhere at once, carried through the root network and translated into sound by thousands of leaves working in perfect harmony. You are not what we expected. Maya couldn't help but grin. I get that a lot. What were you expecting? Death, fear, the usual responses of lesser minds to our defensive protocols. The forest voice carried a note of confusion that somehow managed to sound like rustling leaves and disappointed thunder. Instead, you greet us as if we were acquaintances meeting for afternoon tea. Well, to be fair, I haven't ruled out afternoon tea. Do you guys drink tea? Because I've got some excellent Earl Grey in my survival kit. If a forest could do a double take, this one definitely did. Trees swayed without wind, branches creaked in what sounded suspiciously like laughter, and several small creatures emerged from their hiding places just to stare at the human who had apparently lost her mind. You offer us refreshments? Why not? Maya shrugged and pulled out her camping equipment. Look, I'm going to be honest with you. The Galactic Council is terrified of this place. They think you're some kind of planetary immune system designed to kill anything that doesn't belong here. But from where I'm standing, it looks like you're just really, really good at home security. The creature's bark-like skin shifted colors, flowing from deep brown to a greenish gold that reminded Maya of sunrise through morning mist. You are not wrong. We have protected ourselves from those who would take without asking, harvest without permission, destroy without consequence. Maya finished setting up her portable camp stove and looked up at the towering being. And the survey teams that disappeared? Relocated. The forest voice now carried a note of what might have been embarrassment. To other worlds. Uninhabited worlds where they could no longer threaten our ecosystem. Maya paused in the middle of measuring water for tea. Relocated. As in, still alive? Very much so, though perhaps somewhat confused about their current circumstances. The sound that came from Maya's helmet comm suggested that Arya was experiencing the digital equivalent of a nervous breakdown. Captain, are you telling me that this planet has been conducting involuntary interstellar relocation programs? Sounds like it. Maya lit her camp stove and settled back on her heels. So, mystery solved. The terrifying Deathworld that eats survey teams is actually running the galaxy's most aggressive witness protection program. The forest creature moved closer, its root tendrils spreading across the ground in complex patterns. You find this amusing? I find it brilliant, Maya said, and meant it. You've created the perfect deterrent. Everyone thinks you're deadly, so they leave you alone. Meanwhile, you're just trying to live your lives without some mining consortium strip harvesting your planet. This is not the response we anticipated. Maya poured hot water over her tea bag and inhaled the familiar aroma of bergamot. Let me guess. You were all geared up for another round of terrify the aliens and ship them off to somewhere safe. And instead, you get a human who wants to have a conversation. We have never encountered a species like yours. The creature's voice carried a note of genuine curiosity now. Your people seem to find danger entertaining? Some of us do. Maya took a sip of her tea and sighed contentedly. Others prefer safer pursuits like accounting and professional bowling. But me? I like places where the scenery might try to kill me. Makes life interesting. And this is why your species is considered problematic by the Galactic Council? Maya laughed, and the sound seemed to ripple through the forest connection. "Oh, we're considered problematic for a lot of reasons. We domesticated wolves and called them pets. We invented extreme sports. We colonized worlds that other species wouldn't visit on a dare. And apparently, we're the only species crazy enough to show up on a Deathworld and ask for tea recommendations." The creature settled into what might have been a sitting position, its root network spreading even wider. "Tea recommendations? Well, you've got all these amazing plants. Surely some of them would make decent tea. Or coffee. I'm not picky." For a long moment, the forest was completely silent. Then, slowly, a sound began to build that started as a whisper and grew into something that could only be described as planetary laughter. Trees shook with mirth, flowers bloomed in rapid succession, and even the ground seemed to vibrate with amusement. "You wish to trade botanical knowledge?" Maya grinned and pulled out her datapad. "I wish to do a lot more than that. See, I've got a proposition for you. We are listening. The Galactic Council has a problem. They've got mining rights to this system, but they can't use them because everyone's afraid of you. You've got a problem too. Eventually, someone's going to figure out that you're not actually killing people. And then you'll have every resource extraction company in the galaxy knocking on your door." The creature's eyes focused on her with renewed intensity. "Continue." Maya stood up and began to pace, her excitement building. But what if there was a way to solve both problems? What if the Galactic Council could get their mining rights, and you could get permanent protection from unwanted visitors? "Explain." "Simple. I negotiate a deal. The Council recognizes Nethys Prime as a sovereign world under human protection. You get full diplomatic status, complete territorial rights, and a guarantee that no one mines anything without your explicit permission. In exchange, you allow limited, supervised resource extraction from areas that won't damage your ecosystem." The forest went quiet again, but this time it felt like the kind of quiet that preceded major decisions rather than major disasters. "And what do humans gain from this arrangement?" the creature asked. Maya's grin turned predatory. "We get to be the official intermediaries for all trade with Nethys Prime. Plus, I'm betting you've got some seriously interesting biotechnology that could benefit human colonies. Medical applications, environmental restoration, agricultural improvements. The possibilities are endless." "You would represent our interests to the Galactic Council?" "I would represent our mutual interests. Think of it as a partnership rather than a protection racket." Arya's voice crackled through the comm system. "Captain, are you seriously negotiating a planetary defense contract?" "I'm negotiating a lot more than that," Maya replied. "I'm negotiating the first human Nethys Prime alliance, and unless I'm seriously misreading the situation, our new friends here have been waiting for someone to make exactly this kind of offer." The creature's bark-like skin shifted through a spectrum of colors before settling on a warm golden hue. "You are perceptive. We have indeed been seeking a way to engage with the broader galactic community without compromising our world's integrity. So we have a deal? We have the beginning of a deal. But first, you must prove that your species can be trusted with the knowledge of our true nature." Maya raised an eyebrow. "What did you have in mind?" "Live among us for one full planetary rotation. Learn our ways. Understand our connection to this world. If, at the end of that time, you still believe that cooperation is possible, we will consider your proposal. One full rotation. How long is that in standard time units?" approximately 27 of your days. Maya looked around at the forest that was watching her with thousands of eyes, felt the ground humming with biological energy beneath her feet, and thought about the look on the Galactic Council's collective faces when she returned with a signed treaty instead of a death certificate. "Deal!" she said, extending her hand toward the creature. The being looked at her outstretched hand with obvious confusion. What is the significance of this gesture? It's how humans seal agreements. You clasp hands with someone to show that you trust them, not to stab you with whatever sharp objects they might be carrying. An interesting tradition. The creature extended something that was part hand, part branch, and part complex root system. When it made contact with Maya's glove, she felt a brief tingle of electrical activity. "Welcome to Nethys Prime, Captain Torres of Earth. We look forward to learning if your species is as fascinating as you are." 27 days later, Maya sat in the same clearing where her pod had landed, but everything else had changed. The forest around her was alive with activity as dozens of Nethys Prime's inhabitants went about their daily routines. She'd learned that they called themselves the Verdanti, and that their connection to their world was so complete that the concept of individual identity was almost meaningless to them. She'd also learned that they made excellent tea from a plant that grew only in the highest mountain valleys, that their biotechnology was at least 1,000 years ahead of anything the Galactic Council had developed, and that they had a sense of humor that ran toward elaborate practical jokes involving mobile topography. Area. Are you ready to record my final report? Standing by, Captain. Though I have to say, the Council is going to have a hard time believing any of this. Maya looked around at the forest that had become her home for nearly a month. Then, I guess it's a good thing I brought evidence. She stood up and walked to the center of the clearing, where a new structure had grown over the past week. It looked like a cross between a government building and a very large tree, with walls that seemed to be made of living wood, and windows that were actually transparent sections of bark. Council transmission. This is Captain Maya Torres reporting from Nethys Prime. The response came almost immediately. "Captain Torres!" Crix 9's voice was so filled with relief that it was practically tangible. "We had given you up for dead. Are you injured? Do you need immediate extraction?" "Negative on the extraction, Control. I'm calling to report mission success." A pause. "Mission success?" "Captain, your mission was to survive contact with a Deathworld. Simply being alive doesn't constitute—" "Control, I'm transmitting the signed treaty now." Another pause, this one considerably longer. "Captain, did you just say treaty?" Maya smiled as she uploaded the document that had taken her and the Verdanti 3 weeks to negotiate. The Nethys Prime Accords, establishing full diplomatic relations between the Galactic Council and the sovereign world of Nethys Prime, with the United Earth Colonial Service serving as primary intermediary for all trade and cultural exchange. The silence from the Council was so complete that Maya wondered if her transmission had failed. "Captain Torres," came Zeph Alpha's voice, carefully controlled, "are you telling us that you have successfully negotiated a diplomatic agreement with a Deathworld?" "I'm telling you that I've negotiated a diplomatic agreement with one of the most advanced civilizations in this sector of the galaxy. A civilization that happens to live on a world that previous survey teams misunderstood rather spectacularly." "Misunderstood how?" Maya looked over at her friend, Vex 17, the Verdanti who had become her primary guide and teacher. The being's bark-like skin was currently a cheerful shade of blue-green that indicated amusement. "Control, it turns out that Nethys Prime isn't a death world at all. It's just really, really good at making people think it is." Over the next hour, Maya explained everything she had learned about the Verdanti, their protective strategies, and their desire to engage with the broader galactic community on their own terms. She transmitted botanical samples, technological specifications, and enough data to keep xenobiologists busy for the next century. When she was finished, the silence from the council chamber was the kind that typically preceded either standing ovations or complete nervous breakdowns. "Captain Torres," Zeph Alpha finally managed, "are you saying that the terrifying Deathworld that has haunted our nightmares for the past decade is actually inhabited by a species of peaceful, highly advanced plant beings who have been protecting themselves through elaborate misdirection?" "That's exactly what I'm saying." "And they're willing to trade with us?" "Under very specific circumstances, with very specific protections, and with humans serving as intermediaries, yes. And in exchange for these intermediary services, Earth receives—" Maya's grin was visible even over the long-range transmission. "Exclusive access to Verdanti biotechnology, mining rights to 3 uninhabited systems, and a 50-year contract for protective services that's worth approximately 40 billion credits." The sound that came from the council chamber might have been cheering, or it might have been several different species having simultaneous heart attacks. "Captain Torres," Crix 9's voice was faint but audible. "How exactly did you manage to accomplish in 27 days what our best diplomatic corps couldn't achieve in a decade?" Maya looked around at the forest that had become her second home, at the friends who had taught her that the universe was far stranger and more wonderful than she had ever imagined, and at the future that was opening up before humanity like a flower blooming in fast forward. "I asked nicely," she said, "and I brought really good tea." 6 months later, Maya stood on the observation deck of the newly constructed Nethys Prime Embassy Station, watching as the first official Galactic Council delegation prepared to land on the planet's surface. The station itself was a marvel of human engineering and Verdanti biotechnology, a living structure that grew and adapted to meet the needs of its inhabitants. "Nervous about meeting your old friends?" asked Vex 17, who had accepted the position of Verdanti ambassador to the Galactic Council. Maya laughed. "Are you kidding? I can't wait to see Crix 9's face when he realizes that the terrifying Deathworld he's been having nightmares about is actually one of the most beautiful places in the galaxy." Through the transparent wall of the observation deck, they could see the Council shuttle approaching the planet's surface. Maya had insisted that the first landing take place in the same clearing where she had made contact with the Verdanti, and the forest had obligingly cleared a proper landing pad. A landing pad that was currently surrounded by several hundred curious Verdanti who had gathered to get their first look at the legendary Galactic Council. "Think they'll like us?" Vex 17 asked, a note of genuine concern in the forest voice. Maya put her hand on her friend's bark-like arm. "They're going to love you. And if they don't, I know a really good relocation service." The sound of planetary laughter echoed through the station's living walls as the first official diplomatic mission to Nethys Prime touched down on a world that had gone from being the galaxy's most feared Deathworld to its most sought-after ally. All because one human had decided to ask nicely, and had brought really, really good tea.